What if the biggest thing holding you back isn't the fear of failing, but the fear that it might actually work? It sounds absurd at first, doesn't it? After all, we've spent our entire lives believing that failure is the enemy. We tell ourselves that we're afraid of making mistakes, being judged, losing money, or looking foolish. But what if that's only the story you've learned to tell yourself? What if, hidden beneath every excuse, every delay, every abandoned dream, there is a much deeper fear, one so subtle that you've mistaken it for procrastination, perfectionism, or simply not being ready yet? Think about it for a moment. How many times have you convinced yourself that you just needed a little more preparation? One more course. One more book. One more perfect plan. One more Monday to finally begin. Yet somehow, the moment never arrived. Opportunities came and went. Ideas that once filled you with excitement slowly faded into the background, replaced by routines that felt safe, familiar, and strangely comfortable, even when they made you unhappy. Have you ever wondered why? Maybe the answer has nothing to do with discipline. Maybe it has nothing to do with motivation either. And perhaps, for the first time, you'll begin to see that the battle has never been between you and success. It's been between the person you've always believed yourself to be, and the person you could become if your life truly changed. This is where the work of Carl Jung becomes impossible to ignore. Jung believed that the greatest struggles we face are rarely caused by the outside world. They emerge from the hidden forces within the unconscious, the parts of ourselves that quietly shape our choices long before we become aware of them. According to his psychology, the human mind is filled with invisible patterns, forgotten fears, and identities we cling to because they make us feel accepted, even when they keep us trapped. Sometimes, the prison isn't built from failure. It's built from familiarity. Imagine what would happen if everything you've been wishing for suddenly became real. The career you've dreamed about. The recognition you've secretly wanted. The freedom you've imagined late at night when no one else could hear your thoughts. At first, it sounds exciting. But look deeper. Success would force you to become someone different. It would change your routines, your relationships, your responsibilities, and perhaps even the way people see you. More importantly, it would change the way you see yourself. And for the unconscious mind, that kind of transformation can feel more threatening than remaining exactly where you are. This is why so many intelligent, capable people unknowingly sabotage their own potential. Not because they lack talent, but because a hidden part of them is trying to protect an identity that no longer serves them. The strange truth is that your comfort zone isn't always comfortable. It's simply familiar. And the unconscious often prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar freedom. So before you assume you're afraid of failing, ask yourself a different question. What if every hesitation, every delay, every unfinished goal has been pointing toward a fear you've never dared to name? Because once you recognize that fear, you'll begin to understand why your own mind may have been standing between you and the life you've always believed you wanted. And to uncover that, we first need to understand the invisible identity that has been quietly controlling your decisions all along. Essa introduco foi construta para abrir varios loops mentais, gerar identificaco imediata e conduzir naturalmente para o próximo bloco, onde será apresentada a idea de identidade invisível, persona, antes de explicação mais profunda da psicologia de Jung. Aqui está a tradução para inglês americano natural, fluido e adaptado para ser como roteiro original de canal de psicologia no YouTube. Before we continue, I want to invite you to do something. If, at any point during these opening moments, it felt like someone was putting into words thoughts you've never been able to explain, then this video may be exactly what you needed to find today. And believe me, we're only getting started. Over the next few minutes, you'll discover why so many people spend their entire lives fighting an enemy that was never failure itself, but an unconscious part of themselves that resists transformation. Understanding this could completely change the way you see your choices, your fears, and even your own potential. If this kind of content resonates with something deep inside you, take a moment to leave a like. That simple action helps the algorithm bring this message to more people who may be struggling with the very same inner conflict. And I want to ask you an honest question. Have you ever felt like you were just about to achieve something truly important, only to pull back, procrastinate, or find a reason not to move forward? If you've experienced that, let me know in the comments by writing, "I've felt that." I genuinely want to hear your story, because one of the most powerful realizations we can have is discovering we're not alone, often because someone else found the courage to put into words what so many people feel but so few are willing to admit. And if you enjoy deep reflections on Carl Jung's psychology, personal growth, self-discovery, stoicism, and the hidden mechanisms of the human mind, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. With every video, our goal isn't just to share knowledge, it's to inspire a genuine transformation in the way you see yourself and the world around you. Now, get ready. Because there's a silent reason your mind may be resisting success without you even realizing it. And once you understand how this invisible force shapes the identity that governs your decisions, you may never look at your fears the same way again. Se desejar, também posso adaptar essa trajetória para estilo ainda mais cinematográfico e emocional, semelhante aos maiores canais americanos de psicologia e desenvolvimento pessoal no YouTube. Aqui está a trajetória em inglês americano, mantendo todas as ideas, phrases e nuances emocionais, adaptadas para soar como roteiro original de canal de psicologia de alta rendimento no YouTube. It may be difficult to accept this at first, but there's a possibility that could completely change the way you see your own life. What if you've never really been running from failure? What if everything you call procrastination, insecurity, or a lack of discipline is only the surface of a much deeper inner conflict? Think about how many times you've felt that intense desire to change your life. You pictured a different future, made plans, searched for new paths, and promised yourself that this time would be different. For a few days, everything seemed possible. Then, almost without realizing it, something changed. The excitement faded, the excuses began to appear, and what once felt so important slowly shrank into the background of your mind. The most fascinating part is that this pattern doesn't happen just once. It repeats itself. Like an invisible cycle that always seems to pull you back to the very place you were trying to leave behind. You might blame your lack of time, exhaustion, or the circumstances of your life. But deep down, in the quiet of your own awareness, one question keeps coming back: why does this happen precisely when things are finally starting to go well? Why do so many people give up just when they're closer than ever to the transformation they've always wanted? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This quote isn't just about self-awareness. It reveals that there's a part of your mind working behind the scenes, influencing your decisions without ever asking for your permission. That's why, so often, you believe you're making free choices when, in reality, you're simply repeating patterns that have been built over many years. Patterns shaped by the fear of rejection, the need for approval, the expectations of your family, society, and even the image you've learned to create of yourself. Maybe you grew up believing you had to stay quiet to be accepted. Maybe you learned that standing out was dangerous, that dreaming too big was arrogant, or that wanting an extraordinary life meant disappointing someone else. Those messages weren't always spoken out loud. More often than not, they were absorbed through subtle looks, criticism, comparisons, and small moments that became deeply imprinted on your unconscious mind. Over time, this limited version of who you believe you are begins to feel completely natural. You no longer realize you're wearing a mask. You simply believe the mask is who you are. And this is exactly where the mind's most silent trap begins. Because when a real opportunity appears, when success stops being just a fantasy and begins to take shape, that old identity reacts as if it's under attack. Not because it wants you to suffer, but because it was built to keep you safe within what is familiar. This is where so many people mistake protection for a prison. And it's this very distinction that begins to reveal the true conflict between who you believe you are and the person quietly waiting beneath that identity. If this reflection resonated with you, write the word awakening in the comments. It might just be the first step toward recognizing what has remained hidden inside you for so long. Aqui esta a tragicao para ingles americano natural, fluido e involvent, adaptada para sor como rotero original de canal de psicologia de alta retenção no YouTube. There's one detail that very few people ever notice: the human mind wasn't designed to pursue happiness. It was designed to seek safety. And to the unconscious mind, safety rarely means freedom. It means repetition. It means staying with what is familiar, even when what's familiar is causing you pain. That's why so many people remain in relationships that hurt them, stay in jobs that drain them, or give up on their dreams before they ever discover what they're truly capable of. The problem isn't a lack of potential. The problem is that an old identity is still trying to protect a reality that should have been left behind long ago. Carl Jung understood this brilliantly when he developed the concept of the persona. The persona is the mask we create in order to be accepted. It begins to form early in life, when we realize that certain behaviors earn approval while others are criticized or rejected. Little by little, we start hiding parts of our true nature to preserve love, recognition, and a sense of belonging. The most fascinating part is that, over the years, we forget we're even wearing the mask. Eventually, we come to believe that it defines who we truly are. Now imagine what happens when an opportunity comes along and threatens to shatter the identity you've spent years building. If you've always believed you were just an ordinary person, how will your mind react when faced with the possibility of achieving something extraordinary? If you've spent years telling yourself you're not good enough, how will you respond to genuine praise, recognition, or prosperity? It sounds contradictory, but many people feel more uncomfortable receiving success than facing hardship. After all, failure reinforces the story they've learned to tell themselves. Success, on the other hand, demands that the story be rewritten. Maybe that's why you're so hard on yourself. Maybe perfectionism has never been a sign of excellence, but an unconscious strategy to avoid ever truly exposing yourself. As long as everything remains in the planning stage, you never have to face the risk of discovering who you could become. As long as you keep waiting for the perfect moment, you're still protected by that old identity. But that protection comes with a silent cost. Every delay reinforces the belief that you're not ready, until that belief begins to feel like absolute truth. Jung also said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows larger." The more you try to escape this inner conflict, the more it quietly shapes your decisions without you even noticing. It's as if two versions of yourself are walking side by side: one longs to grow, awaken, and live authentically, the other does everything it can to preserve the safety of what has always been familiar. And understanding this inner battle is only the beginning, because there's an even deeper force operating behind the scenes of your mind, a force that explains why so many people end up sabotaging the very things they desire most. If this message describes something you've experienced, write this phrase in the comments: "I'm ready to change my story." Sometimes, a single sentence spoken with conviction is where real transformation begins. Aqui esta a tragicao para ingles americano natural, fluido e emocionalmente envolvent, preservando todas as ideas e adaptando as expressos para que som como rotero original de canal americano de psicologia e desenvolvimento pessoal. But there's a question that may have never crossed your mind, and it has the power to completely change the way you interpret your own fears. Who would you become if everything actually worked out? Don't think only about the achievements. Think about the person you would have to become in order to sustain them. Because reaching a goal is only one part of the transformation. The real change happens when your identity no longer fits the life you used to live. And that's precisely the moment when the unconscious mind tends to offer its strongest resistance. Carl Jung believed that the deepest purpose of human existence wasn't to seek comfort, but to move toward the process of individuation. This process represents the integration of the self we present to the world with the parts of ourselves we've hidden throughout our lives. In other words, it means letting go of the masks and discovering the true self. But this path isn't comfortable. Quite the opposite. It requires confronting the shadow, that part of the personality that holds everything we've repressed, our fears, our desires, our forgotten talents, our creative potential, and even the courage we learn to hide in order to be accepted. It's interesting how many people imagine the shadow as nothing more than a dark place filled with flaws. But Jung saw something far deeper. Hidden within it are also the qualities you've never allowed yourself to develop. There may be a version of you that's more confident, more free, more authentic, and more powerful, quietly waiting to emerge. Yet embracing that version of yourself means letting go of the limited identity you've spent years building. And to the unconscious mind, that can feel deeply threatening. Think about someone who spent their entire life believing they had to please everyone. If that person finally learns to say no, some relationships will inevitably change. Someone who has always lived in search of approval may discover that authenticity makes people uncomfortable, especially those who benefited from their constant compliance. Someone who has always hidden behind modesty may even feel guilty when recognition finally arrives. Do you see how success doesn't just threaten your circumstances? It threatens an entire identity. That's why fear so often appears precisely when you're standing in front of a door that could transform your life. There's a quote by Jung that captures this process beautifully: "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." What this means is that real transformation doesn't happen when you try to appear stronger. It happens when you have the courage to face what you've spent your life avoiding. Self-awareness doesn't eliminate fear. It reveals where fear comes from. And once you finally understand that your self-sabotage isn't a personal flaw but an unconscious mechanism of self-protection, something begins to shift inside you. From that moment on, the question is no longer, "Why do I always end up back where I started?" Instead, it becomes, "What part of me still believes I don't deserve the life I truly want to live?" And it is within the answer to that question that a kind of freedom begins to emerge, one that very few people ever experience in their lifetime. If this reflection awakens something within you, write the word authenticity in the comments. Sometimes, recognizing who you truly want to become is the very first step toward letting go of the character that fear created. Acqui esta a tragiceo para ingles americano natural, fluido e emocionalmente involvent, mantendo todas as ideas e nuances do texto original e adaptando as expressos para ser como rotero auténtico de canal de psicologia e desenvolvimento pessoal. What if I told you that success doesn't just change your life, it also reveals who was truly meant to be part of it? This is one of the hardest truths to accept. Many people believe that achieving their goals simply means gaining more freedom, more recognition, or greater peace of mind. But there's a side of transformation that almost no one talks about. When you change on the inside, everything around you begins to respond differently. Some people start to admire your courage. Others feel inspired by your growth. But some, unfortunately, become uncomfortable with your evolution, because your change highlights their decision to remain the same. Perhaps that's exactly what your unconscious mind is trying to protect you from. Because if everything works out, you won't be able to keep pretending you're the same person. Conversations that once seemed meaningful may no longer resonate with you. Environments that once felt comfortable may begin to feel suffocating. Habits that once defined your daily life may simply lose their place. And this doesn't happen because you've become better than anyone else. It happens because growth changes perspective. Once consciousness expands, it can no longer see the world in the same way it once did. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Notice that he didn't say to become perfect, admired, or successful. He said to become real. And perhaps that is the greatest challenge of personal development. It isn't about acquiring a new identity, it's about letting go of the one that was built merely to survive. For years, you may have lived seeking approval, avoiding conflict, and hiding important parts of your personality. But eventually, there comes a moment when continuing to wear that mask requires far more effort than taking it off. That's why so many people describe an awakening of consciousness as uncomfortable. Not because the truth is painful, but because it demands responsibility. Once you recognize the mechanisms of self-sabotage, you can no longer blame circumstances alone. Once you understand how the persona influences your choices, it becomes much harder to keep believing that you were born to live a limited life. Self-knowledge stops being an interesting theory and becomes a constant invitation to act differently. Maybe you're living through that moment right now. Maybe a part of you already knows that waiting for the perfect moment is just another way of staying exactly where you've always been. And perhaps the most important question is no longer, what if I fail? Instead, it slowly begins to transform into something far more powerful. What will I need to leave behind when I finally become the person I've always been capable of being? Because every true transformation requires a quiet farewell. It asks an older version of yourself to stop guiding your life so that a new one can finally take its place. And understanding that farewell changes the way you see fear, courage, and even the meaning of success itself. If this message resonated with something deep inside you, write the word transformation in the comments. Sometimes, recognizing that an old version of yourself needs to be left behind is the very first step toward allowing your true self to emerge. Acqui esta a tragiceo para ingles americano natural, fluido e emocionalmente involvente, preservando todas as ideas, phrases e nuances do original, adaptadas para ser como roteiro autêntico de canal americano de psicologia e desenvolvimento pessoal. Now imagine waking up exactly 5 years from today. Don't change anything about the scene. Just observe. There's a version of you who kept waiting. They still tell themselves that one day they'll finally begin, that they just need more time, more money, more confidence, more certainty. Their daily routine is almost exactly the same. Their dreams are still alive, but only in their imagination. There's a quiet feeling that life could have been different, but it was postponed so many times that postponement itself became part of their identity. Now imagine another possibility. In this second reality, you felt fear just as intensely as you do today. You also experienced doubt, insecurity, and moments when you wanted to give up. The difference is that, at some point, you decided to stop obeying your fear. You kept moving forward despite it. And little by little, the person who once seemed impossible to become began to appear before your very own eyes. The profound truth is that both of these versions came from the same person. They both started exactly where you are right now. The only difference was the decision to keep feeding the old identity, or to allow a new level of consciousness to take the lead. Carl Jung believed that no one finds true meaning by living only according to what others expect of them. Our real purpose emerges when we have the courage to listen to our own soul, even if that means letting go of old certainties. And perhaps that's exactly why so many people spend years trying to change only their results, when what truly needs to change is the way they see themselves. There's a question that may stay with you long after this video ends: who would you be if you stopped making decisions based on the fear of losing other people's approval? Think about it honestly. How many of your life's choices were made simply to avoid criticism? How many dreams have remained hidden because they seemed too big for the version of yourself the world had grown accustomed to? Self-awareness isn't just about understanding the past. It's about setting your future free. Once you begin to realize that the persona once served an important purpose by protecting you, but no longer has to direct your life, something extraordinary begins to happen. Fear stops being the one in command and becomes nothing more than a passenger. It still exists, but it no longer chooses your destination. Perhaps success was never the real challenge. Perhaps the greatest challenge is accepting that you possess far more potential than you've allowed yourself to believe all these years. And if that's true, then the question that opened this video takes on an entirely new meaning. What if it works out? No longer sounds like a threat. It becomes an invitation. An invitation to leave your old story behind, step into the unknown, and discover the person who has always existed beneath the masks, waiting only for you to find the courage to finally meet them. If this reflection resonated with you, write this sentence in the comments: I choose to become who I truly am. Sometimes, a single declaration can mark the beginning of a transformation that has been waiting for you for a very long time. If you've made it this far, maybe this wasn't just another video for you. Maybe it was one of those rare moments when something clicks deep inside, even before you can put it into words. And if that's what happened, don't ignore that feeling. Sometimes, a single idea is enough to change the direction of an entire life. If this message awakened something within you, subscribe to the channel now. This is a place for people who want to better understand the human mind, explore Carl Jung's ideas, deepen their self-awareness, strengthen their emotional intelligence, and find the courage to live more authentically. If you felt like this video was speaking directly to you, it's because we still have many more journeys to take together. I'd also love to hear your story. Let me know in the comments, does this message reflect what you've been feeling? Or share, in your own words, which part resonated with you the most. I read the comments. And many times your experience could be exactly what someone else needs to hear to realize they're not alone on this journey. If this video made you see yourself in a different light, take a moment to leave a like. That simple gesture helps this message reach people who may be going through the very same inner conflict, caught between who they believe they are and who they truly have the potential to become. And share this video with someone who needs to hear this question: what if it works out? You never know when a single reflection might reach the right person at exactly the right moment. Now don't stop here. The next video appearing on your screen was chosen because it takes this journey of transformation even deeper, exploring another powerful aspect of Carl Jung's psychology and the awakening of consciousness that can completely change the way you see yourself. Click on it now and continue this journey of self-discovery. I have a feeling that your next step could be even more important than this one.